Get the party started.
I'm going to cover in this video why you need a build system. Now, I can remember the first time as a earlier web developer, somebody said, run a build system or run a build on your JavaScript, and it totally freaked me out. I was like, what do you think I am? Some sort of full-on programmer here? And so I'm going to demystify that in this video, talk about kind of what a build system is. It's not a scary thing. What it does for you, and you'll hopefully see why professional web developers all use build systems or should use build systems, and kind of the advantages that it will give you. So why you need a build system, let's just look into what should a build system do. First off, it's going to do repetitive tasks, things such as concatenating JavaScript. Say you don't want your browser to release a billion JavaScript files like this. This is a bad idea because when your user wants to load your web page, this is going to request this file from your server and this file from your server and this file. It's going to open 20 requests to your server, and your server has to go hit the hard drive 20 different times to return 20 different files. That is not an efficient way. It's so much faster to return one file where they're all just back to back added into each other, as if you were to copy paste. Of course, copy, paste, and save is a terrible way of doing it, and you do not want to deploy a gigantic piece of code. So concatenating JavaScript, also CSS, concatenating any kind of files that should go together into one file. Prefixing CSS, like border radius, then Mo's border radius. You don't have to do near as much of this stuff as you used to have to do, but that's something you shouldn't have to do day in and day out when you're writing code. You can just write border radius, and that should be auto-prefixed for you. Let's see, we should run some utilities on our code like JS hint. So when we save a JS file, if there's a coding error in there, JS hint can catch it for us a lot of times, and we shouldn't have to put that into production or sniff it out in our console to find out that there's an error there when it's clearly a coding error. So we should be able to run JS hint on our code. We should be able to uglify it, which is compress and minify it. And what that is here's like, say I wrote this main JS. I have a say name function and a say age function. I could put this file up there, and that's, I don't know how many bytes of data it is, but if I minify it, I run, say, uglify.js on it, that can minify down. Let me turn word wrap on here. That can minify down to this piece of code, which is literally half the file size. This file will load twice as fast if I deploy this file, because you'll notice what it did is instead of being called function say name, it kind of crunched it down to function A. And then later on, it calls it as function A. It says A right there. Whoop. Come back to me. And there you are. So it'll run function A and it'll run function B because it renamed them the smallest possible things that they can be called. And so that's minified JavaScript. We can also minify CSS kind of the same way. Here's CSS. It can be minified down like this into a very ugly form. The problem is you don't want to have to maintain this CSS. That's a headache waiting to happen. So we just want to deploy this. We don't ever want to code this or even look at it with our physical eyes. So there's utilities to do that. We also want to run a local server in a lot of instances. So that way we don't have to open this file by doing file open in Chrome. That's an annoying way of doing it. We want to be able to go to localhost and just view it as if it was on the web without actually putting it up to the web. So we know that if it works on our computer, it's pretty much going to work when we push it to our website. And then we also want to run live reloads. Whenever we save our file, it'll automatically refresh our not only our browser, but also any devices like any iPhones or whatever that are connected to our server. And so all these things are done by a build system. Now, common build systems are Grunt. Grunt is probably the most popular still. It was kind of like almost exclusively the most popular. Gulp is the new guy on the block and is very, very popular. I'd say they're about equal right now. Brunch is a much more simplified one that's also out there as well. But if you're going to learn one, I'd say learn Grunt first because it's still kind of the one that most companies are using. Gulp is the one that most companies starting up new projects are going to be using. So Gulp's going to be an important one to learn here very soon. But start with Grunt, then go Gulp. And then why is this good for you? I kind of already mentioned, page speed is huge. If you're loading if you're making 20 requests to the server just for your JavaScript files, that's going to slow things down. Also, if these things are not minified, it's literally each one is taking twice as long to load as it has to. So that's not a good thing. You want to be able to load 1 or 2, maybe 3 JavaScript files that are compressed, they're very small, and they have all the code that you need. Usually a good idea is you want to load maybe 1 JavaScript file for they're called vendor files. That would be like jQuery, Bootstrap, any code that you're not writing is called vendor code. So maybe a compressed vendor one, and then another one that's your actual application code. So whatever is for your website, deploy one for that. Now, if you have this massive application and there's 100 different pages, and maybe all the user profile pages need code that the rest of the website doesn't need, well, then you can load another one that's just user, and that would have all the stuff for when the user's logged in and that stuff. So, but you don't want to deploy anything you don't have to deploy. You don't want to make any requests you don't need to make. And this is very common. You'll look at a lot of web pages and you'll see just dozens of requests happening, and their page is terribly slow compared to what it could be. And they don't actually have to change their code. They just have to change the way their code is being deployed. So page speed is huge. Development workflow is really the big win to me, though. You can use cool technologies like Sass. Instead of having to write your CSS, well, if you don't know Sass is a much more fun way for developers to write CSS. You can break your code into multiple files. Back in the day, we used to write CSS files that were gigantic, and it would be such a pain. You're scrolling and scrolling through literally thousands of lines, and that kind of code breaks easy. That kind of code is terrible to maintain. So now you can break your code into a lot of little files that each have a name based off of what they do, and you can just kind of concatenate them all together and then spit them all out as one file. And that's also easier to avoid code conflicts. If you have a team of multiple people working on the JavaScript files, I touched this file, there's a lot lower odds that somebody else touched this file. They probably touched a different file if they're working on a different task. And once again, you can avoid annoying repetitive tasks like prefixing your CSS and stuff like that. So that's what a build system is. Hopefully that makes sense to you, and in the next videos we're going to get into building our first build system with Grunt, and it is not as scary as you think. The only thing you're going to want to do is watch my intro to Node.js to get a very, very basic understanding of what Node.js is, and if you've seen that, or if you're kind of comfortable with running Node on your machine, then we're going to get into Grunt. Here we go.